Imagine that you are a king so powerful that you can rule the whole world in the palm of your hand. But then, overnight, you find yourself facing a great revolution where you are the main target. I'm Ingrid, and today I'm going to reveal the surprising story behind the song Viva La Vida by Coldplay here on the Decifra Hits channel. The lyrics of Viva La Vida reveal the deepest feelings of sadness and helplessness that haunt the mind of a great king whose days are numbered. The story begins the moment he realizes there's no way out for him anymore, and then his life starts to flash right before his eyes. The king reflects on his days of glory when he used to rule the world with absolute and sovereign power, feeling as if even the seas would open at his command alone. During the great victorious battles he fought, he could see the fear reflected in his enemies' eyes. And for a moment, when he closes his eyes, he can even hear the crowd shouting, "Now the old king is dead. Long live the king." That phrase was the traditional shout in ancient Europe when a new king was crowned. In other words, he's remembering the sublime feeling he experienced when he finally ascended to his throne. However, this strong sense of authority is soon replaced by a feeling of sadness when he realizes that the people were rebelling and that the foundations supporting the power of the monarchy are becoming increasingly weakened. And I found out that my castle is built on pillars of salt, pillars of sand. So he comes to his senses and laments not being the glorious king he once was, using the act of sweeping the streets to symbolize the loss of his power. Now I sleep alone in the mornings and sweep the streets that were once mine. Besides being metaphorical, this passage reminds us of the last emperor of China, who after his imprisonment and the fall of the government, ended his life as a simple gardener. One minute I was holding the key, the next the walls were closing in on me. This verse expresses how the monarch felt suffocated, unable to see any solution that would allow him to escape that situation in time to save his life. Furthermore, we see that in violent historical revolutions that mark a change of government, the ruler is usually imprisoned by the people until they are executed. And that's why this song is closely connected to the story of one of Europe's most famous monarchs. But for you to understand who we're talking about, we need to go back to the despair of our protagonist when he realized that the same people who applauded his coronation were now fighting for his downfall. And more than that, they wouldn't rest until they claimed his head as a prize. Listen to the bells of Jerusalem ringing, the choirs of the Roman cavalry singing. Bells are usually metaphors to indicate the arrival of something important and often tragic. Here, the protagonist draws an analogy with the biblical story of Jesus Christ's persecution by the Roman cavalry leading up to his crucifixion to symbolize his own death. This comparison shows that for the king, his execution would be just as unjust as the crucifixion of Jesus in the biblical context. But gradually, he begins to take some responsibility for the serious consequences of his reign. Although he is still a bit confused and doesn't really know what caused such a great revolt among the people, he reveals that he is not a person worthy enough to have the privilege of entering paradise. For some reason I can't explain, I know that Saint Peter won't call my name. According to Christianity, Saint Peter is the one who holds the keys to heaven, having received from Jesus Christ the task of deciding who will enter paradise or not. And in the midst of this flood of thoughts, a strong realization about his life arises, followed by an intriguing question. The position of king is desired by many, but would it really be something perfect? Here, the protagonist makes it clear that in his case, it wasn't perfect because even with so much power in his hands, he never truly felt free, comparing himself to a puppet easily manipulated according to the interests of others. By this point, we can already see that Coldplay wanted to simulate what was going through the mind of a great king in his final moments by telling a story of revolution and death in the lyrics of Viva La Vida. And for that, they use several biblical metaphors and passages with historical references, which are widely interpreted as a reinterpretation of the French Revolution, an important series of popular uprisings that influenced the world. To stop being ruled by kings and queens with absolute power and gradually become the democratic system we know today? In Viva La Vida, we can draw a parallel between the protagonist of the song and the life story of King Louis XVI, who ruled the most powerful nation on the European continent at the end of the 18th century France. We just need to notice the similarities between his life and the character in the song. Louis XVI never wanted to be king, but he was crowned even though he wasn't interested in politics. Because of that, he made his decisions like a puppet.
Oh, who would ever want to be king?
Based on the advice of the court and Marie Antoinette, his wife.
Just a puppet on a lonely string.
In 1793, at the height of the French Revolution, Louis XVI tried to escape when he saw his life was in danger, but he was captured and sentenced to the guillotine.
King Louis XVI, who ruled the nation in the 18th century.
In his final moments, he even tried to give his last speech, but the drums and shouts of the angry crowd were too loud, and so the people got his head without even hearing his last words.
Never an honest word, and that was when I ruled the world.
Even with these similarities, some people say that the lyrics are about a romantic relationship or even about Napoleon Bonaparte, another historical figure. But in fact, the band never confirmed if it was about anyone in particular. However, the beauty of the lyrics of Viva La Vida is precisely due to the fact that they can be interpreted in many different ways. What is certain is that this atmosphere of conflict between freedom and revolution is present not only in this song but throughout the entire concept of the album Viva La Vida. The CD cover itself was inspired by the painting Liberty Leading the People by the painter Eugène Delacroix from 1830. It shows a woman standing over bodies lying on the ground while holding the French flag in one hand and a kind of weapon in the other, a clear representation of the French Revolution. Another interesting fact is that the full title of the album is Viva la Vida, or Death and All His Friends. This second expression contrasts with the first, but together they convey the central idea of the album, which brings reflections on life and death in several of its songs. Okay, but how did this title come about? Well, if you've watched our other videos about the band, you know that the lead singer Chris Martin trusts his instincts without fear and his incredible musical sensitivity, which in the end turns out to be essential in all of the group's biggest hits. And it was no different with Viva La Vida. During a trip to Mexico, Chris Martin went to visit Casa Azul, the former home of the famous painter Frida Kahlo, which after her death was turned into a museum open to visitors. When he got there, Chris was impressed by the works of the Mexican artist, but one in particular caught his attention. A painting created in 1954 with fruits and vibrant colors. And what made it even more impactful was the phrase Frida wrote on the painting just 8 days before she died. Chris Martin was impressed by Frida's bravery. Even on her deathbed, she was able to celebrate life in her last painting. Enchanted by that phrase, Chris Martin wrote it down and decided that it would be the title of his next album and also the title track. And just as curious as the choice of the title was the emergence of the first verses of the song. Chris Martin explained that he was about to go to sleep after taking some pills for that when the first lines of the song came to his mind. He was unsure whether he should try to go back to sleep or go downstairs and start working. And fortunately for all the band's fans, he chose the second option. From then on, the group spared no effort to finish the song. And anyone who has known Coldplay since their first albums knows that Viva La Vida, released in 2008, represented a change of direction in the band's musical style. Many people question the reason, but Chris Martin has already explained why this transformation happened.
I think we felt after our last record, X and Y, which we're very proud of, but we felt like we'd done that sound as much as we could do it.
And we don't want people to get tired of our sound, so we have to change it. Well,
The most impressive thing is that even after all the band's dedication, this song was almost discarded by the record label, if it weren't for a small detail.
At the time, someone at the label said, "Look, you've got to take this song off. It doesn't sound like a band." And when it arrived, I was like, "This is our best song ever." It was only because of Steve Jobs. Steve put it in an Apple commercial, which made it a hit song.
With Viva La Vida, Coldplay created an anthem that is a true work of art, since in addition to all the visual aspects, the song also finds artistic expression in its instrumentation. String, instruments, and bells can be heard throughout the entire song, which gives that sense of grandeur and awakens an inexplicable nostalgia and joy in those who listen. Well, maybe not so inexplicable. A scientific study from the University of Cambridge, together with the Spotify platform, chose Viva La Vida as the perfect song to wake up to in the morning. According to psychologist David Greenberg, the harmony and rhythm of this Coldplay song make it ideal for shaking off a bad morning mood and motivating us for the daily battles. Did you know that? Comment Viva La Vida so we know you made it this far. The psychologist also concludes by saying, "Music is not just for entertainment, it's something that enters our psyche and our brain. The more we study music, the more we discover the role it played in our evolution, and it seems that Coldplay knows how to do this in a unique way." The search for self-knowledge is present in this song and in several other hits by the band, just like in Clocks, which shows us how the effect of the relentless passage of time influences our eternal search for the meaning of life. By clicking on this video here, you'll understand how they created yet another masterpiece. Thank you so much for staying with us, and see you next time.